Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Bates Botanical Bootcamp. I know that the spring kind of flurry and spring plant rush has kind of died down, and we've gotten into the summertime. We've slowed down a lot out here, just the way y'all have when it comes to planting, so we do appreciate y'all joining us and watching today. So what do we have today? We've got hydrangeas. I love hydrangeas, and we all do, I feel like. Nothing really, I mean, there are a lot of things that give you color, but there's something about hydrangeas that are just a little bit different. They're kind of that Southern Living magazine feel. They give you certain colors that you don't see all the time. They got different bloom shapes, different leaf sizes. There's all sorts of different things about hydrangeas that we love. So I'm going to talk to you today about 5 different species that we sell here and that we sell a lot of, and we typically always have. Like I was saying, there's 5 different species mainly that we grow here and sell here and that live well in Middle Tennessee. I think the first one that I'm going to talk about is the one that I'm pretty sure people think about more so than any hydrangea, and that's going to be like our Endless Summer Collection hydrangeas. Now, when you come out here and you see these blue pots, it almost always says Endless Summer on it. That is kind of a brand name for hydrangeas. And this is referring to the Macrophylla hydrangeas. When I say Macrophylla, that is the specific species of the plant. And Macrophylla simply means macro meaning big and phylla meaning leaf. So these are the big leaf hydrangeas. These are the ones you think about that are either blue or pink or even a little bit of both, which would be more purple growing in the landscape. Now, these, like I said, are probably the most iconic, the ones we think about the most. Why that is, I think, is because they go blue, and they go almost true blue. You don't get true blue in the plant world very often, so finding one that's blue is pretty cool. This one is not blue. This is a different variety altogether. This one's called Blushing Bride. Now, hence the name Blushing Bride. The bride is wearing white, but she is blushing, so sometimes you get some pink in there. So you get kind of this white to pink for the most part. And it's a beautiful round bloom. So they're the typical round blooming hydrangeas. One thing you need to know about these is that they are not all that sun tolerant. Okay. Now, what I want you to know is that they don't, need just like deep shade. There's not a deep shade loving plant. It's just not. But it is a filtered light type of plant. So if you have a woodland environment, if you have a part sun location where you get sun in the morning and a little bit of reprieve in the afternoon, this would be a good selection. What happens if you put these in the full sun is that they can live, don't get me wrong, but they tend to wilt on you, and they'll even sun wilt. When I say that, that means they may not even be dry down below in the ground, but the sun just hits them and it just makes them want to just lay down a little bit. That's very typical of a new planting when it comes to these. These are going to wilt on you in the sun when they're young. Now, as they age and they kind of latch in deep to the earth and they start tapping into their own water, or they have a good water source down below, they will be fine in the full sun. And they bloom the best in a good amount of sunlight. So a good morning sun environment for a little while throughout the day is a really good option for these. Hence the name hydrangea. Think about it. Hydra is in the name. So with all these hydrangeas, they're fairly water loving. One good thing about hydrangeas, especially on a new planting, is that whenever they are dry, they will wilt on you. So they tell you when they're thirsty. They're not bad about doing that at all. If we ever see them out here on the lot getting dry on us, they will just turn down and wilt and look so bad. We know to water them. Within 15 to 20 minutes, they perk right back up. So these are pretty much water-loving plants. Don't put them in a dry, sunny spot or anything and expect them to do well. You're going to have to water them, especially whenever they're young. With all these, though, like I was talking about, 4 out of the 5 species of these hydrangeas are going to be more kind of shade-tolerant and want some more shade or at least afternoon protection. There's one that I'm going to get to that can take sun all day long. We'll get to that soon. But like I said, the most iconic and the most classic is this Macrophylla hydrangea right here. Another thing to note about these hydrangeas is that the pH of your soil determines what color you're going to get on your bloom. So for the most part, these are white, and that is the case. But like I said, they can show up pink sometimes if you have a higher pH. Generally speaking, the higher the pH, you're going to get pink. The lower the pH, you're going to get blue. These white ones are kind of funny because they actually are white. but you don't always see that. Sometimes you see them fading into pink. So do know that. And this Macrophylla hydrangea is the one that has the round balls on it. That's another. We're going to get to a different one that doesn't have that here soon, but this one is round, and it's probably the favorite of everybody's. I'd say they love to see the blues and the pinks, and this gets about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. It's a big bushy plant, and it returns every year. One thing I do want you to know is that you can't prune these all the way to the ground. Less pruning typically is better with the Macrophylla hydrangeas. You have to, as annoying as it is, these sticks over the wintertime get pretty ugly. I'm not going to lie to you. They're fairly unsightly. They're aesthetically displeasing, but you have to leave those stems up because hydrangeas of this type bloom off of old wood. So anything that comes up from the ground and the roots, see, these things are going to come back from the ground every single year. They're going to re-push from the ground and send up sucker sprouts, is what we call those. Those sucker sprouts are typically not going to have blooms on them. They bloom on the old wood. So these old sticks that are up are going to produce leaves, and then they're going to produce blooms. So try your best not to prune these. You can get them back uniform. You can tip prune a little bit, get the sticks back where they're like, uniform all together, but do not take them all the way to the ground. As ugly as the sticks are over the winter, you got to leave them up so they bloom off that old wood. That's about it when it comes to the pruning. Like I said, they're going to have sucker stems. They're going to fill out every year. Every year you can go in there over the wintertime and prune out the dead or dying or diseased or crossing wood from the interior of the plant. That's about all you're going to do when it comes to pruning. Like I said, less is usually more whenever you want to get those blooms in the summertime. Unfortunately, with hydrangeas, sometimes they will leaf out early in the spring from the stems, and they'll be looking good and everything will be great in the spring, and then we'll get a late frost or a late freeze and it will whack back those leaves that were already up. Whenever you get that, you generally do not have a good blooming year. That's nothing on you. It's nothing you could have done. It's simply Mother Nature, and it happens. This year we did not get that. Hydrangeas were out a little later, and they did not succumb to a late frost or freeze this year. And we have had an excellent hydrangea year. The blues and the pinks, I'm sure around town y'all have seen them. They've been lit up this year with great blooms, great foliage, been very clean. It's been a really nice year for the Macrophylla hydrangeas. So excellent plant to grow. It's a southern staple for sure. So good one. All right, let's move on. Got more to talk about here. I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to grab the next one. So, next up, we have the Annabelle type of hydrangeas. It's called Hydrangea arborescens. That's the specific species of this hydrangea. This one variety name is Incredible. I recently did a video on Incredible hydrangeas on my Worth a Grow series that is pretty cool. It's certainly worth a grow. This is an excellent plant. It really is. It amazes me, actually. This one's recently been cut back. So this one was grown in Alabama. So they had already had their flush. It was in full bloom probably 2 weeks ago, and then the bloom started to fade, and they've simply cut them back here at the tips. And what we're seeing is a regrowth here, where they regrow from, which is pretty much as all plants go. They regrow from on these what we call nodes, which is in front of this leaf on this bud is going to crack out here. All these are going to crack and fill out, and we might actually see a rebloom on this. This is a classic kind of shadish loving plant. They can take more sun, as I was talking about with the other one. They can take more sun as they get established, but whenever they're young, they prefer a semi-shade environment. So once again, very similar to the first one I talked about. Morning sun environment's fine with a little bit of afternoon protection. Maybe the shade from the trees, is a good environment for them, but not like a blazing hot sun in front of a brick wall environment type of plant. It's just not like that. This one is the classic big white round balls that we see in the summertime. I've got these at my house, and I absolutely love them. They are best used in a massing environment, not just a single plant in the garden somewhere. They just don't do it that way. If it's me, I want to put 5 to 7 to 10 of these all together in a mass and let them grow all up together with maybe some other flowering plants out in front of them to create the best effect, if you ask me. This plant right here, it doesn't really matter how you prune it. It'll bloom off new and old wood, which is nice. You can see sucker sprouts from this get very tall. I know this because at my house, I've noticed the sucker sprouts. So I planted them last year. I cut them back uniform to about 2 foot tall. All the sticks from last year, I kept them up. Like I said, I cut them all at the same level, all uniform. And what I saw is leaf emergence from the old sticks, which is common. You're going to see that leaf out, and then you're going to see sucker sprouts from the ground come up as well around the base of the plant. And what I noticed and observed with mine at my house is that my sucker sprouts actually outgrew the stems from the old sticks. So the sucker stems are actually taller than the stems that I left up, but both of them bloomed. So they were both in full show. They show a ton of blooms on every single stick pretty much. And this Incredible variety has really been a good one because it's got sturdy stems. One thing that people have a problem with, and I do too, we all do, is whenever hydrangeas get up and big and they got these big white round balls and they look great, and then we get this thunderstorm that comes in and just brings in wind and rain, and it just lays them down. With Annabelle hydrangea specifically, which is the one we typically all think of, they tend to want to lay down on you, and nothing's worse than a hydrangea that flops. I hate it. We all hate it. But those blooms are so big and so heavy once the water gets on them that they want to turn down. Incredible, I've noticed, has that full-size bloom, but it's got the sturdy sticks that can actually support it. So I was actually literally at my house the other day. It was at night, and a thunderstorm came in, and it was pretty intense at my house. Not gonna lie, it was really windy. It was really rainy, and I was on my front porch watching my hydrangeas, and I saw that they stood up to that wind and that rain, and they did not flop afterwards. Don't get me wrong, they turned down a little bit. The blooms did. But after the rain settled and a lot of that water kind of got off of those blooms, they perked right back up and they were standing up tall. So excellent variety to grow. One of my favorite hydrangeas. This is what people call a lot of times snowball bush. You see that. Now, I do want you to know there's a difference between this and the old-fashioned snowball bush, which is technically a viburnum. That blooms in the springtime, and it gets much, much larger. It's not to be confused with the hydrangeas. These are summertime bloomers like they all are. So when you come out here and ask for a snowball bush, let us know if you're talking about a spring blooming viburnum or you're talking about a summer blooming hydrangea. But either way, both of those plants are cool. But this one's a really nice one to use in the landscape. Like I said, great for massing, doing a long wall up against some evergreens or something out in front. Say you got some like arborvitaes or something in a row that are screening off your neighbors or screening off whatever you want. Putting Annabelles out in front of those creates a whole dramatic effect. You still get your evergreens in the backdrop, but you get these crisp white blooms out in front of those that are about 4 to 5 to 6 feet tall, depending on how old they are. It creates a really nice effect. So beautiful, beautiful plant to grow. And we got a lot of them right now. I think we got 40 of them in yesterday. So if you need one, come on out. All right, switching gears. Let's move on. Let's show you oak leaf here. All right. Oak leaf hydrangea. A little wild, a little gangly. That's kind of what they do. This is probably the biggest growing hydrangea that I brought in today. These get very large. This is just the straight species, just straight up hydrangea quercifolia. So hence the name quercifolia. Quercus refers to an oak tree. That is the genus of all oak trees is quercus. So quercifolia. Folia means foliage, so oak-like foliage. As you can see, they have an oak-like leaf. These plants are excellent in mass as well. They also can be used as a singular plant, maybe on the corner of your home or maybe tucked into a corner of your home where you need some good space filler against a wall or something. They're pretty rapid growing plants, and like I said, they get very large. I've seen 8 to 10 to even 12 foot oak leaf hydrangeas in my day if you don't prune them. Now, these are also I've seen these in full blazing hot crazy sun all day long, and they do live, but they stress. They get a little stressed in those later months in August, September, when we start to get hot and dry, and they just don't like it. So putting them in a more shade-ish environment is the way to go. So once again, this is your classic woodland garden plant. It pairs well with, say, you do a backdrop of these in a mass, say 3 to 5 of them, whatever, and then you got your hostas or some sedge or something out in front of them. They pair well with that woodland kind of theme. They bloom off of their old wood, so you don't want to cut these all the way back to the dirt. You can if you want, but you typically don't see a great bloom response the next season. So once these bloom a little bit earlier. Actually, this is probably the first one to bloom out of all these hydrangeas that I brought in here, and they bloom, like I said, it's like late spring into summer, and they bloom these big white conical shape blooms. So they're kind of open, airy just a little bit. They're pretty much true white, and then after they finish their white cycle, they go into a like reddish pinkish stage. So you can see leftover blooms on these that'll be more reddish to pink. After that, they finish to just a brown. They are a pretty good cut flower. You can cut the flower and bring them in for dried arrangements or whatever, and they do pretty well paired with other things. It's a cool plant. It's probably, I don't know, it's a little less popular maybe than the first two that I've talked about, but still a good seller for us. I like oak leaf hydrangea okay. It's probably my least favorite out of the ones out of here, but that's fine. But it's still a good tried and true plant. So after it does bloom in the spring and you want to get, rid of those old spent blooms if they're brown or looking rough, whatever, you can simply cut them off and go ahead and give it a prune. If they're getting too big on you, which they do sometimes, after they bloom, give them a somewhat severe prune. Take them down about a third, maybe even 2/3 if you want. They're an established hydrangea is fine. It's going to re-leaf back out on you. So if it starts to get too big, let it bloom, finish that cycle, and then let's give it a cut back. You will see a regrowth, and it'll be nice and tight, and it'll be a little bit fuller of a plant. And then we're going to just simply let that go dormant over the winter time. And if you want to do any wild hair pruning, if anything got a little tall or, out from the shrub a little bit too much, you can take that back a little bit, get all the sticks back uniform, like I've already talked about with all the other ones, and you'll see leaf emergence in the spring, and you'll see a bloom. So these are consistent performers, easy plant to grow, but it does get large, so allow for space. But it's a good little tried and true plant for sure. All right, oak leaf. Done with that one. Let's move on to the least known hydrangea, I believe. All right. This guy. This is a cool plant. This is Hydrangea serrata. So we typically call this the mountain hydrangeas. Hence the name serrata. It refers to the leaf that has very much more serrated leaves than the other ones do. It's very similar to a Macrophylla, the very first one that I talked about, in how we're going to treat it though. This one's specifically called blue billows, and I actually grow this one at my house. I got 3 of these in a little triangle pattern, and it's a pretty true blue. Now the biggest difference we need to talk about with this plant is, I'm hoping you can see, this is what we call a lace cap style hydrangea. So the blooms are not perfectly round at all. They have this flat kind of spray appearance. If you can see right in here, this one, it's unfortunate because last week this was probably full show, but as you can see, it's just a different type of bloom. It's very flat. It's got its kind of reproductive structures in the center of the plant, and then it's got the petals on the outer edge of it. Now, this one's called blue billows, and it does come out blue almost always. Mine came out blue for sure, but it fades to pink fairly quickly. Now, it's got a lot of blooms on it. It pretty much blooms from every stem. It's a very easy plant to grow. It's another one that we're going to treat, though, very similar to the very first one I talked about, the Macrophylla style hydrangeas, to where we're going to put it in a semi-shade environment. I've got these, like I said, in my house, and they do sun wilt. Last year was the first year I planted them, and I actually had to water them a fair amount because they would wilt on me during little dry spells. Once you water them, they typically perk right up. Right after, like I said, about 15-20 minutes, you'll see a perk up, and they'll be nice and happy again. But they still prefer a little bit of a shade environment. Nothing deep. I don't want a deep, heavy shade, all-day shade environment. You're not going to get great blooms out of that. So a nice mix of both is kind of what you want. It's a cool plant. It's another one that blooms off of the old wood. So as ugly as the sticks are over the wintertime, we've got to leave them up so they crack back out off that old wood and then bloom off of that. So not much more to talk about when it comes to the serratas, minus y'all ought to grow them. They're our least popular hydrangea by far because the bloom isn't near as round nor as, I guess, just true as the Endless Summer collection. But they're so cool when they get big and you get these flat masses of all these petals and blooms that are all together. It really creates a dramatic effect, and it's something that you just don't see in the landscape very much. So growing these, I think, is worth it. I know that the other ones are much more popular, but this one's kind of cool. It's not something you see all the time, but it's certainly a good little plant that I think deserves more recognition. Like I said, I've got 3 at the house, and I love them. They're still small. They grow a little slow, I'm not going to lie. From what I've observed, out of most hydrangeas, they're pretty quick. I mean, a lot of them are really fast to grow. This one here is taking its little time, and it's just kind of slowly pushing. But once they get big, they'll still get up into that 4 foot tall, 4 to 5 foot tall and wide, size. But they're worth growing. There's something different about them, something that I like, and I think you will too. Their disease resistance is really nice. They don't get a ton of leaf spotting. They're a pretty hardy plant. They're actually very cold hardy for hydrangeas, so one of the best ones to grow, but it's probably the least popular. So add some of these to your garden. I think you'll like them. All right, so let's talk about the last one that I brought in today. Right here. All right, look at these blooms. This one's in full show right now. This one is called Limelight. Now, this one is different in the first 4 that I've talked about. This plant right here can handle full sun all day long without a break, no problem at all. It sits on our lot on asphalt all day long with no break from the sun. You can't throw more sun at it than what we do all day long. Stands up to it just fine. It's the only one of these hydrangeas that I believe really can stand full intense sun all day long. Like I was saying, this is a Paniculata type of hydrangea. That's the species. And that refers to the blooms and how they are kind of set. So they've got this kind of triangle, at the base working to a point. If you can kind of see, they're not perfectly round at all. Now, this one is our best seller. It's called Limelight. Hence the name Limelight. It comes out as this kind of greenish look on the bloom first. It's got this green tinge to it. And then it goes to this true brilliant white, which is what you see here. After it goes white, it ends up going to its classic, like most of the other hydrangeas, to its pink, and then to kind of a reddish tinge after that. After that, it goes brown. And like I said, you can cut those and bring them in your house as dried cut flowers, or simply just remove them. This is... Gosh, out of all of them that I've talked about, maybe the hardiest variety I think there is. It is amazing how fast this plant grows. It's hardy all the way up. I watched a video of a guy that grows them up in Maine, so I know they live at least up that far. And they're just tried and true. These bloom off old wood and new wood, doesn't matter. These, I will say though, do not sucker near as bad as some of the other ones do. All the other ones I've talked about, minus oak leaf, it doesn't sucker all that bad. But this one doesn't sucker at all. So it pretty much just comes back from its sticks every year and blooms off of that wood, old or new, doesn't really matter. I do recommend with these get big, okay, y'all? This one's Limelight. I have seen Limelight hydrangeas 8 to 10 feet tall. You may not believe that, but it's true. They can get that big. They almost get equally as wide if you let them. I don't recommend you let them do that. What I recommend is that you prune them severely. So after they finish their cycle, after we get into the fall and into the winter, these are going to drop their leaves. So over the winter time, really any time, but typically, December, January, in those times, we're going to go ahead and give these a cut back. And I like to take them back pretty far. I want to get rid of any sticks that are just small and weak, like this one right here. Like this would be something that I would prune off because look, it's just a skinny little stick. That's not going to hold up a bloom next season. That's what we want. We want hefty stems that are going to hold up these blooms. These can flop as well if you let the sticks get if they stay too thin and they're not chunky enough to hold up those blooms. After a big wind or rainstorm, they can flop as well. So we want to avoid that. So we can do that by pruning. We take them down. We only keep the stems that are nice and sturdy and chunky, which is what we want. And we'll get them back uniform to where all the sticks are at the same size over the wintertime. They're going to leaf back out over the spring, and they're just going to bloom in the summer consistently. You can go through summers with the endless summer, the first one that I talked about, and never see a bloom. You may have had hydrangeas in your beds that have never bloomed for you when it comes to the endless summer collection. This one, not a problem. The only way you are not going to see blooms on this hydrangea is if you put them in deep, heavy shade. They will not bloom in deep, heavy shade, or they'll bloom weak, and it won't be good. This plant prefers full sun. I'm telling you, full sun all day. Excellent hardy plant. Like I said, this is our best seller. Now, this one's Limelight. This one is the full-size Big Daddy. There are dwarf varieties of the Panicle hydrangeas. Shoot, there's a number of varieties of Panicle hydrangeas nowadays. I mean, gosh, we probably sell 10, I'd say, different varieties. And they're all very similar but different in little ways. There is a little brother to this plant. It's called Little Lime, and it's the dwarf variety of Limelight. Now, don't let dwarf... don't let that fool you. We're still talking 4 to 5 to 6 feet tall, even with little lime, if you don't cut them. So there is not a Panicle hydrangea that I know of that's in that 2 to 3 foot size range. That just doesn't exist. This plant gets big, but pruning them will keep them in check. And I will say too, we sell this plant as a tree form. Now, tree form hydrangeas are awesome. They can be used in a whole number of ways. In the dead center of your bed, and you can work around them. You can put them at the corner of your home as kind of an anchor. And it simply is just what they did is they took one stem from these a long time ago when they were growing them, and they kept one stem and they staked it up, and they got it growing upwards. So what you'll see if you come out here, you'll see tree form hydrangeas that are about 3 to 4 foot of stem, and then a big ball of beautiful above that, and they can be used the exact same way. My mother grows that at her house. She's had it for about 5 years now. I prune it for her every year, and it's gotten to be an awesome plant. It just, the caliper of the stem, what I mean, the size of the trunk has really swelled up, and it just looks like a cool tree with a nice big canopy on it, loaded with full blooms every year. It's just a really tried and true easy plant. Limelight. There's another one called Bobo, which is another dwarf variety. It's got a little bit more of an open bloom. It's not near as tight as Limelight. It's kind of it's a little bit more open and airy, but it's a dwarf variety that'll stay a little bit smaller for you if that's what you need. I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about how to grow hydrangeas and where to put them. Because of their size, they're limited to where you can put them. Sure, you can put them out in the yard or out in an open area just by themselves or in mass. That's fine if you're not growing anything around them. But if you want to work them into your landscape, it gets a little bit tricky because they get big. So a little tip for y'all is to use... We want to incorporate flowering shrubs with evergreens within our bed if we can. So we get a little bit of winter interest, we get that summer bloom, we get multi-season interest is kind of what we want. So using the big stuff in the back of the bed is way better when it comes to figuring out your plan for your garden. So bringing evergreens, say, let's just talk a classic southern garden landscape. You're going to pair hydrangeas with, say, boxwood. Boxwood's a tried and true evergreen shrub. Everybody knows boxwood. It's very versatile, but it's very tidy, stays small. A lot of people want to try to put boxwoods in the back row against your brick wall or whatever it is in your home, and then try to work hydrangeas out in front of them. Switch it up, do it opposite. Take these hydrangeas, the ones that get big, and put them up against the wall that gets large. So you have these big showy blooms in the backdrop, and then you've got your evergreens out in front of them to give you winter interest. And what you'll see is that over the wintertime, whenever these guys get ugly, and all of them do, they just show their sticks, you can take those sticks back uniform like we talked about, and you still got evergreens out in front of them that kind of hide that ugly kind of stick, those ugly upright sticks over the wintertime. So choosing, planning out your bed, think about your bigger flowering stuff towards the back of the bed, and, evergreens out in front of that. So that's just a little design trick that a lot of people don't know. They want to do it the opposite way. Try to work that in, that way, and I think you'll have a better looking landscape. Awesome.
We have a couple questions that have been coming in. We have one question about propagation, but I want to address that a little bit later. First one's, we have two that are pertaining to the paniculatas that you talked about.
Okay.
Because quickfire is a paniculata, right?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody's asking, will it tolerate full sun 6+ hours, or would you recommend the limelight instead?
Instead of quickfire?
Yes.
No, quickfire is another paniculata. All of the paniculata species are totally fine in full sun. I've got a treeform quickfire at my house, actually. It's full show right now. It's beautiful. And like I said, it's another one. It's just a treeform variety. But the shrubs can handle full sun. Like I said, we keep them on the lot 100% of the day on asphalt, full sun, no break from the sun at all. And they do just fine. They prefer that. So keep them in the full sun. 6+ hours, totally fine. You know, we deem full sun as really only 4 to 6 hours of sunlight a day, direct sunlight. So as long as you're getting that, these plants are going to be fine. So you don't have to have like an all-day sun, spot. You can have it in a 4 to 6 hour type of area, and it'll be fine as well. So, but yes, quickfire is the exact same way as limelight, except for the blooms are a little bit different. They're definitely more open. They're not near as tight as this. They're a little bit more. There's a little bit more air, a little bit more gap in between those individual petals, but. It's hence the name quickfire. It does bloom quicker than limelight does, so it's about a week or two in front of limelight. But most definitely, put them in the full sun; they'll be just fine.
And Heather on Facebook has a question. I have one limelight in full sun and one in partial sun. The partial sun one is twice as large.
That's funny. You know what happens sometimes with full sun loving plants? This goes with roses as well. You put plants in a shadier environment, sometimes they stretch for the sun. So that's why you're probably seeing a bigger shrub in the partially sun environment, because they want to stretch. Like I said, roses are the same way. People tell me all the time, they've got this shade environment. They say, well, if I put this sun plant in the shade, is it going to die? No, sun plants in the shade don't die. They just grow differently. Some grow slower. Some grow faster. You put a rose in the shade, what's going to happen? It's going to be a long, gangly, leggy plant with hardly any blooms on it because it's getting shade. It needs more sun than that. The sun is going to kind of keep those leaves. It's going to keep it shorter, actually, because it's getting plenty of sun. It doesn't need to reach for it. So I'm assuming that's what's going on with your hydrangea. It's bigger than the other one because it's reaching out, trying to get more sun. But I hope they're both doing well. I mean, I'm assuming the partial sun one still blooms for you. Hopefully it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the partially sun one won't bloom as good as the full sun one. We'll see. But it should be, I guess, blooming probably right now, both of them. So that's cool. But yeah, it does happen.
All right. And Bonnie had a question about hydrangea propagation.
Okay.
You got any tips? Just kind of general
propagation on hydrangea. Yeah. Hydrangeas are pretty easy to propagate, just from cuttings. You're not going to do it from seed very much. It's a little bit tricky to do that from the Serrata types of hydrangeas. They produce a good amount of seed still, so you can try to go that route. But for the most part, taking cuttings of hydrangeas is the way to do it. And it's usually just softwood, new cuttings. So when I say softwood, that's kind of the newest growth up here. It's really easy on the Annabelle type of hydrangeas, like I was talking about with the Incredibles. Literally just taking a stick, cutting a stick about 6 to 8 inches, removing a couple of the lower let me just show you.
Be gentle.
All right. We're going to take this weak stem that I was going to prune anyway. So this is a simple cutting technique. This goes with almost all plants, or really all plants, whenever you are taking cuttings. So you take a stem similar to this. You can take them smaller if you want, but generally get you a good amount of nodes. All of the roots that are going to be produced from a cutting are going to come from where these leaf nodes are. So that's where new growth happens, and that's also where roots happen. So what we want to do is remove these. Just going to literally strip them right off. And now we've got 3 exposed, even 4 exposed nodes. Here, 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 and here. All of this we are going to stick down in moist soil, and we're going to leave this green growth up, and we're going to put these in the shade for a while. So propagating them is really easy. They actually freely root very easily. So like I said, get you a little, a pot, whatever it may be, whatever medium you have, and a nice, loose, well-drained soil. We sell a product here called Proganics I, which is our indoor earth mix collection that we have, and it's got really well drained soil in it. Leaches very good. So stick this down in the dirt, keep it moist, keep it in the shade until it roots. Once it roots, you'll feel it. You just kind of tug on the cutting to see if it's rooted in or not. If it's got some tug back, if it doesn't pull right up, then you know it's got roots, and then it's ready to be transplanted. So if you're on a budget and you got a Annabelle hydrangea and you want to have 20 more Annabelle hydrangeas because you got this massing area that you want to do, this woodland environment, you want to create a scene, get yourself 20 cuttings of these things, stick them down in moist soil, and they're going to root, and you'll have a much bigger plant before you know it. I mean, really, within 2 to 3 seasons, you'll have more or less a full-size shrub from a single cutting like this. That's how all of these plants are typically produced, y'all. They take the nurserymen take cuttings just like this. They start them young, 2 to 3 seasons with them, ship them out to us. You got a full-size shrub to sell to y'all. So it can be done. It's not that hard. I did a webinar, I think, on propagation a while back that you can watch that might be helpful for you too.
Yes, that's in our webinar archive that's available on our website, batesnursery.com. Click on the blogs tab up at the top, and you'll see View Botanical Bootcamp webinar archive. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time to go ahead and chat them. We'll go ahead and do that. Let's see. We have another one here. I planted a hydrangea too close to a tree and want to move them. They're small. When is a good time to move them, and will they survive? And what's their root system like?
Yeah, as long as you do what you should do, they should survive. I would recommend not doing it right now. Hydrangeas get pretty stressed in the summertime, as y'all probably know. If you neglect them, or if you don't get a lot of that root, or if they don't stay moist enough, then hydrangeas are not going to fare so well. So what I'd recommend is kind of living with it until we get into the fall more. And really the best time to really transplant any deciduous shrub, so meaning things that drop their leaves, is whenever they drop their leaves. So as we get into fall and into winter, after they shed their leaves, dig those things up, move them where you want to put them, keep them moist. But generally our winters here and early springs are typically pretty moist, so it's not like too hard on you. Plants are not actively photosynthesizing whenever they're dormant. So if they don't have leaves, they're not really using a lot of water. Really hardly any water, actually. I mean, they still need some. I'm not saying bone dry, keep the roots out of the, exposed to the air all winter or anything. But if they're in the ground, typically here in Middle Tennessee, over the wintertime, we stay pretty moist. So let them go dormant first. Just live with them for a little while. Let them go dormant. It'll be much easier on the plant for you to transplant them whenever they don't have leaves. And then they should regenerate in the spring and leaf out and bloom out just like they do. So, yeah, it can be done. It'll be fine, but just wait a little while.
The soil at my house is mostly clay. Is that a problem for this plant?
It depends. Clay can be a problem for any plant depending on what kind of clay we're talking about. So we all have clay. We all live in Middle Tennessee. It's part of it. But we also live in like the hardwood capital of the world. We got more flora in our woods than almost anywhere. So plants are totally fine living in clay. Now, if it's clay that's what I would term gummy, so whenever you put a shovel into the ground and you pull out this clay, and it's like, it's almost like the consistency of like Play-Doh, like
kind of
really
sticky, like it's ready to work clay, like if you're making a pot.
Yeah, like you were doing something like that. Like that's a different kind of clay. If you've got that, that's not good for really hardly any plant, mainly because the soil doesn't drain. Yeah, these plants are water lovers, and they definitely like it, but not all the time, every day, like just sitting in wet. So clay has a way, if it's that gummy, nasty clay, we ought to try to amend that. So we ought to try to get at least some of that out and then work in a soil conditioner that we've got here you can buy, and mix that with that clay to kind of, break it up a little bit. But if it's just if it's dry clay and it ain't real gummy, holding water, no oxygen getting to the roots, if it's not like that, then plant them right in the dirt. I mean, honestly, these plants are very, very hardy plants, especially this panicle right here. I mean, that thing will almost live anywhere. So, yeah, clay's clay. It's part of it. If it ain't gummy, nasty clay, then plant right into it. You'll be fine. And if you need to amend the soil a little bit, it's not bad practice to get you a bag of a topsoil blend or a soil conditioner to mix in half and half with the native soil that you got. Don't just use our potting soil that we have here or anybody's potting soil for that matter. Just that in your pot. You need to incorporate some of that native soil with some bag products if you wish. And But like I said, don't just use a potting medium. You need to mix it with what you've got. It's going to have to learn to grow in your soil anyway. So don't baby it right off the bat and just give it this nice fresh dirt. We need to give it a little bit of both. It needs to latch in. So that's clay's clay. It's part of it.
Yeah, and I would recommend our very own Earth Mix Landscape fermenting 1-to-1 with heavy clay soils, or even our pine fines, which is just a shredded pine mulch that will aid in drainage a lot.
Yeah. Drainage, aeration.
All right. Let's see. Our Annabelle hydrangea, the other name for the Arborescens hydrangea.
Yes, Annabelle, yeah. Arborescens is the specific species of the plant. Annabelle is just the most common one you think of. So the Annabelle type, the Arborescens type, is a native, actually. It's a native to even Middle Tennessee. It's a native to East Tennessee. It grows in the woods. It grows along the wood line for the most part around here. I even see, they're in bloom right now, right up the road. I've noticed them along the wood line. Except the only difference with our native ones versus Annabelle is that our native ones have a much more lace cap bloom. Like I was talking about with the Serrata style, it's not near as showy. It's got these petals around the edge that are kind of okay, and then you got the kind of reproductive parts in the center of the lace cap style. But what happened is that whoever did it, a plant hybridizer, a plant breeder, found one that had this massive, beautiful white round bloom. What they do is they harvest that, mainly by cuttings, like I was talking about earlier, and then you've got a whole new plant. That's how all new plants are found and hybridized or not hybridized, just found as a natural growing plant that just looks cool. And they propagated it, and they got a whole new plant. So Annabelle is the most common arborescens type of hydrangea, and we carry it like crazy too. Like I said, I think I got 40 of them yesterday too. But Incredible I decided to bring in because it's a little bit of an improved variety from Annabelle, I think. But Annabelle's still a tried and true plant. As long as you keep it protected, Annabelle tends to flop a little bit more so than Incredible does. So in a nice protected area away from the winds and corners or wherever, somewhere where you can get a little bit protection, Annabelle's will be a good choice.
All right. I have a blushing bride under a large red bud. It gets late afternoon sun, but it's wilting. Pops back with watering, though. Should I move it? I planted it last fall.
If you just planted it last fall, I'd say give it some time. Like I was talking about with these, as they mature, they usually tap in and root in a little bit deeper, and as the years go on, you don't see them wilting near as badly. What you're doing is fine. If you see it wilting, water it back, and it'll flush back out and respond. But if I were you, if you like where it's at, if I were you, I would stick with it. I know it's annoying right now. You're probably, especially as we draw into this summer, you're probably going to have to be watering it more so than you would like to. But maybe wait a season or two and just see how well it responds and latches in. And you may not see wilting next summer, or you may see a little bit of wilting next summer. And then the summer after that, maybe you'll see less wilting. That's what I've noticed with mine at the house. Like the same as you, I planted mine in the first season. I for sure had to water. I mean, I was out there a fair amount in the dead of the summer. But this year, I haven't watered my Incrediballs once. I've watered my Serrata type, the mountain hydrangea I was talking about, blue billows. I've watered it once this year on a week when we didn't have a lot of rain and it was dry. I've watered it once, so way less than last year. So like I said, if you like where it's at, leave it be. Let's just observe it. If you see it next year becoming a problem and having to water all the time, it's just annoying you, then we can think about moving it. But I bet it'll latch in, and I bet it won't wilt on you as the seasons go on.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I see for now. If there was anything else you were going to talk about hydrangeas,
I don't think so, y'all. I think I've pretty much covered it. You can almost always come out here and find all 5 species of these hydrangeas with multiple cultivars and varieties attached to them. There's not just one panicle. There's not just one oak leaf. There's multiple. So we would have to shut the gate if we didn't have all of these hydrangeas because we sell them like crazy. So they're in full bloom right now, full bloom around town. Come on out and get you some. I think they're definitely worth growing, and we got a staff here that can talk to you all about them if you have questions, whatever you may have. But we got a good selection right now. So that's about all I got, Tyler.
Okay, well, I'm going to pop my head in here and float above Austin. And,
All right.
We have some more webinars coming up this month. Some of them haven't been listed. Actually, I think after this one, we've got to get them actually up on the website. But we will be having on the 15th, so July 15th, that's a Thursday, shade plants with Ben Tress. So Ben's going to go over all the shade lovers that he likes and that would be good for your landscape. These are mostly going to be perennials, but he'll talk about annuals as well. We're also in the middle of doing a bunch of garden tours, so just be on the lookout for content. Austin actually allowed us to film his garden, and his Incrediballs are incredible, and as the rest of his little front garden there is, and you'll be able to see that soon. I am teaching an approaches to mulching webinar that's going to be Tuesday, July 20th, and then I believe, Caroline is going to follow that up that week, that following Friday, with choosing the right house plant for your space. So, if you've been wondering, I have this dark room, but I just don't know what to put in it, then, or what is bright indirect light, this would be a good one for you to check out. And then the following Tuesday, which is July 27th, Austin will be back with Japanese maples.
Japanese maple, that's a big one.
It is a big one, and he's the right kind of person to tackle it. So we are happy to provide these for you. I believe our repotting houseplants webinar and the drought-tolerant plants webinar are going to be live on our website or on our archive. Just click the blogs tab, view Bates Botanical Bootcamp webinar archive. So thanks again, everybody. We appreciate you being here today. And go ahead and sign off, I guess.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, guys. We do like doing these. I love hydrangeas. I love talking plants. So if you ever want to come out and just chat, I'm free to chat with you. We love what we do. So we appreciate y'all tuning in. And grow some hydrangeas. Thank you.